Vincent Reed. One of his father's closest associates. James gritted his teeth. You're too late, Vincent. We have the ledger. Vincent smirked. That's cute. He took a step forward. But you don't understand, kid. That book isn't just a record of your father's crimes. James frowned. What are you talking about? Vincent's smirk grew. It's a hit list. James felt his blood run cold. What? Evelyn whispered. Vincent gestured toward the ledger. Names, dates, payment details. Every person your father ever paid to make a problem disappear. His eyes gleamed. Judges. Politicians. Even people in law enforcement. James gripped the book tighter. If this gets out, Vincent continued, a lot of powerful people are going down. He tilted his head. Including people who would rather see you dead than let that happen. James's mind raced. This wasn't just about his father anymore. It was bigger. Much bigger. Vincent took another step forward. So here's the deal, Carter. Hand over the ledger, and I let you both walk away. James swallowed hard. He could feel Evelyn's tense gaze on him. He could end this now. Give them the book. Walk away. But then what? More people would die. The cycle would continue. His father had built an empire of corruption. If James gave in, he'd be complicit. No. He couldn't let that happen. James met Vincent's gaze. Go to hell. Vincent's smirk vanished. So be it. He raised the gun. A gunshot echoed. But it wasn't Vincent's. Vincent stumbled back, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping between his fingers. James turned in shock. Samuel stood in the doorway, gun smoking. Move. Samuel barked. James and Evelyn didn't hesitate. They lunged for the window just as another round of bullets tore through the room. Glass shattered as they crashed onto the ground outside. James grunted in pain but scrambled to his feet, clutching the ledger. Evelyn grabbed his hand. Run. They bolted toward the trees, gunfire ringing behind them. Samuel covered their escape, taking out another one of Vincent's men before following after them. The car was parked just beyond the tree line. They sprinted toward it, adrenaline fueling their every step. Vincent's furious shouts echoed behind them, but James didn't look back. They reached the car. Samuel jumped into the driver's seat. Get in. James and Evelyn barely had time to slam the doors shut before Samuel gunned the engine. The tires screeched as they sped away from the mansion, leaving their pursuers behind. James clutched the ledger to his chest, his heart still racing. They had it. They had the truth. And now, there was no turning back. Evelyn turned to him, breathing hard. What now? James exhaled, staring at the book in his hands. We finish what my father started. Samuel nodded grimly. Then we better move fast. James tightened his grip on the ledger. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice. And he was ready to burn his father's empire to the ground. 911, what's your emergency? Margaret opened her mouth, but before she could speak, something happened that turned her blood to ice. A voice, low and raspy, whispered through the phone. Too late. Her body froze. A chill ran down her spine as the phone cut off. No dial tone. No operator. Just dead silence. Margaret gasped and dropped the phone onto the bed. Her hands shook as she grabbed Henry's arm. His breathing had grown shallow, his eyes still locked on the doorway. A floorboard creaked in the hallway. Margaret's head snapped toward the door. The flashlight flickered slightly as she lifted it, her breath hitching. The doorknob twisted. Not fast. Not with force. Slowly. Deliberately. Margaret's chest tightened. This wasn't a break-in. Whoever was on the other side wasn't trying to force their way in. They wanted her to know they were there. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. She had to do something. Staying frozen in fear wasn't an option. She scanned the room desperately, looking for something, anything, to defend herself. Her eyes landed on the fireplace poker near the corner of the room. Not much, but better than nothing. The doorknob twisted again. Margaret moved fast. She lunged toward the poker, gripping the cold metal just as the door creaked open an inch. A sliver of darkness seeped into the room. Then, a whisper. Not from the hallway. From inside the room. Margaret spun around, the flashlight shaking in her grip. She scanned every corner, every shadow. The closet. The window. The bedside. Nothing. Henry made a sound, a low, strained gasp. Margaret rushed to him, grabbing his shoulders. His body was trembling. Terrified. "Henry, what is it?" she whispered. His lips barely parted. But he wasn't looking at the door anymore. He was looking past her. At the mirror. Margaret turned slowly, her stomach twisting in dread. The old vanity mirror stood against the wall, reflecting the dim light of the room. Her own pale, wide-eyed reflection stared back. But she wasn't alone. In the mirror, just behind her, a figure stood. A dark shape, tall and unmoving. Watching. Margaret's breath hitched. She whirled around, poker raised. Nothing. The room was empty. She turned back to the mirror, her heart hammering. The reflection was normal again. Just her. Just the room. A cold shiver crawled up her spine. Was she losing her mind? Henry's breathing grew ragged. She rushed back to him, gripping his trembling hand. His eyes were still fixed on the mirror, a look of pure terror in them. "It's okay," she whispered, though she didn't believe it. Then, footsteps. Heavy. Measured. Coming from the hallway. Margaret's chest tightened. Whoever was in the house, they weren't done. She knew she had to act. Clutching the poker, she moved toward the bedroom door. The hallway outside was pitch dark. Every instinct screamed at her not to step out. But she had no choice. She had to see who was there. With slow, careful movements, she pushed the door open. The hallway stretched before her, swallowed in shadow. The only light came from the faint glow of the living room at the end. She stepped out, her fingers gripping the poker so tightly they ached. Her breath came in shallow gasps as she inched forward, every nerve in her body on high alert. The house felt different. Wrong. The walls seemed closer. The air, thicker. The familiar home she had lived in for decades suddenly felt unfamiliar. Another step. Then another. The floor creaked beneath her weight. She winced at the sound. She wasn't alone. She could feel it. Then, movement. A shadow flickered in the corner of her vision. Margaret's heart nearly stopped. She spun toward it, raising the poker. But nothing was there. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Then, from the kitchen, a whisper. Soft. Just out of reach. Margaret swallowed hard, forcing herself to move forward. The kitchen entrance loomed ahead, the doorway a dark, yawning mouth. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the light switch. She flipped it. The kitchen flooded with light. Empty. Margaret let out a shaky breath. Maybe it was just her mind playing tricks on her. Maybe stress and exhaustion were making her imagine things. But then. A new sound. A single knock. Not on the front door. Not on a window. It came from inside the house. Margaret's body went rigid. Her breath caught in her throat. The knock came again. Slow. Deliberate. Coming from the basement door. She turned, her heart thudding painfully against her ribs. The basement door stood at the far end of the kitchen. It was closed. But something was on the other side. Knock. 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 Margaret's hands trembled. She took a slow step forward, barely breathing. Then, the air shifted. The hair on the back of her neck stood up. She wasn't looking at the door anymore. She was looking at the reflection in the kitchen window. And in it, standing right behind her. A figure. A man. But not just any man. Her heart stopped. Her vision blurred. It was Henry. Standing. Whole. Staring at her. But Henry was in bed. Henry couldn't move. The reflection's lips parted. It smiled. Then, the lights went out. The kitchen plunged into darkness. Margaret screamed. Darkness swallowed the room. Margaret's scream caught in her throat as she stumbled backward, the cold kitchen tile pressing against her bare feet. Her heart pounded so violently she thought it might burst from her chest. The reflection. Henry, standing behind her. Whole. Alive. Smiling. But Henry was in bed. Paralyzed. The thought barely had time to register before another sound ripped through the silence. Knock. A single, heavy knock from the basement door. Margaret clutched the fireplace poker in her shaking hands, her breath coming in sharp, uneven gasps. The power had gone out, plunging the entire house into an eerie, suffocating blackness. Logo. LoveVoice. Pricing. History. Blog. Login. See the most popular languages and voices. Learn more. Free text-to-speech over 200 voices and 70 languages. LoveVoice is a free online text-to-speech (TTS) tool that turns your text into natural-sounding speech. We offer a wide range of AI voices. Simply input your text, choose a voice, and either download the resulting MP3 file or listen to it directly. Perfect for content creators, students, or anyone needing text read aloud. Try TTS. Learn more. Text-to-speech. File-to-speech. 2991/3000. Login for more. Clear text. She spun toward the hallway, her instinct screaming at her to get back to Henry. But then. Knock. Louder this time. The basement door rattled slightly, as if something on the other side was pressing against it. Margaret's body went cold. No one should be down there. The basement was rarely used, filled only with old boxes and forgotten furniture. She hadn't opened that door in years. So why did she have the overwhelming feeling that something, or someone, was down there now? She took a shaky step backward, pressing herself against the counter. The kitchen window loomed beside her, its glass reflecting the faint glow of moonlight. Her breath hitched as she turned her gaze to the reflection once more. Henry was gone. The space behind her was empty. Margaret's hands trembled. Had she imagined it? Was it just stress, exhaustion playing tricks on her? Knock. The sound made her skin crawl. It wasn't frantic. It wasn't desperate. It was slow. Measured. Patient. A deep, guttural voice echoed in her mind. Run. Henry's warning. Margaret forced herself to move. She had to get back to him. Now. She turned and darted out of the kitchen, gripping the poker as she rushed down the hallway. The darkness seemed thicker than before, clinging to the walls like something alive. Her bare feet thudded against the wooden floor as she reached the bedroom door. She stopped. The door was open. She had left it closed. A terrible sense of dread slithered through her. Slowly, she stepped inside, flashlight trembling in her grip. She swept the beam across the room, her breath catching in her throat. Henry lay in bed, exactly where she had left him. But his eyes were wide, filled with terror. His chest rose and fell rapidly, his breathing shallow and uneven. His fingers twitched, as if he were desperately trying to move. Margaret rushed to him. "Henry, what is it? What's happening?" His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His gaze flickered past her, toward the hallway. Margaret turned. A shadow. Tall. Motionless. Standing just beyond the bedroom doorway. Watching. Margaret's breath seized in her throat. The flashlight flickered. The figure took a step forward. Margaret slammed the bedroom door shut, twisting the lock with trembling fingers. Her pulse thundered as she stumbled back toward Henry. "Henry, talk to me. Who is that? What's happening?" His lips parted. His throat moved as if he were trying to form words. A single. Then. The doorknob moved. Margaret let out a strangled gasp, yanking open the nightstand drawer. Her fingers fumbled for her phone, but when she grabbed it, the screen was black. Dead. A cold shiver crawled up her spine. The closet door creaked open another inch. Margaret's pulse hammered as she raised the poker. She had to move. She had to do something. She took a shaky step forward. Then, without warning, the bedroom door burst open. The force sent a gust of air through the room, slamming the windows against their frames. The lights flickered, then flashed back on, flooding the space with harsh brightness. The hallway beyond the door was empty. Margaret's breath came in ragged gasps. The air felt thick, electric, like the moment before a thunderstorm. Then, Henry made a sound. A low, broken sob. Margaret spun toward him. His face was twisted in anguish, his body trembling. His gaze flickered toward the hallway again, toward the basement door. Margaret swallowed hard. She didn't want to go. Every instinct screamed at her to stay in the room. To barricade herself inside. To wait for morning. But she couldn't ignore the truth. Something was in this house. Something that wasn't human. And it wanted her to go downstairs. Margaret clenched her jaw. No more running. She gripped the poker, squared her shoulders, and stepped into the hallway. The silence felt heavier now, pressing against her ears. She forced herself forward, each step slow and deliberate. The wooden floor creaked beneath her weight. Then, a whisper. From the end of the hall. Margaret's fingers tightened around the poker. She reached the kitchen. The basement door stood ahead, looming like a mouth waiting to swallow her whole. The doorknob was still. Her breath came in short gasps. She reached out with trembling fingers and touched the handle. It was ice cold. She turned it. The door creaked open, revealing nothing but darkness. A damp, musty scent drifted up from below. Margaret took a slow step forward. The wooden stairs groaned under her weight. The air grew colder with each step. The flashlight beam barely cut through the thick shadows. The basement was just as she remembered, dusty shelves, old furniture, boxes stacked haphazardly in the corners. Nothing unusual. But then. She heard it. A faint rustling. Margaret's heart pounded. She turned toward the sound. The farthest corner of the basement was darker than it should have been. The shadows seemed to pulse, move. Margaret lifted the flashlight, her hands shaking. Something shifted. Something inside the wall. Her stomach twisted. She took a slow step forward. A cold draft blew past her, carrying a foul, rotting stench. Her knees went weak. Then, suddenly, a hand shot out from the shadows. Pale. Gnarled. Clawing toward her. Margaret screamed. The walls lurched. The room tilted. The last thing she heard before the darkness swallowed her was Henry's voice. A whisper. Desperate. Terrified. You weren't supposed to see. Darkness. A suffocating, endless void. Margaret's body felt weightless, as if she were floating in cold, black water. The silence was deafening, pressing against her ears, muting every breath, every heartbeat. Then. A whisper. Distant. Hollow. Right next to her ear. Margaret. Her eyes flew open. Pain shot through her skull as she gasped for air. She was lying on the damp, cold basement floor. The flashlight had rolled several feet away, its beam flickering weakly across the dirt-covered ground. For a moment, she didn't move. She couldn't. What had happened? She remembered the basement door, the whisper, the hand reaching from the shadows. Margaret's breath hitched. The hand. She bolted upright, her heart hammering. The basement was eerily silent. The air smelled of mildew and something worse, something rotten. Slowly, she turned her gaze toward the corner where she had seen the movement. The shadows were still. Had she imagined it? No. She had seen it. Felt it. Something had touched her. Margaret forced herself to her feet, her legs unsteady. She snatched up the flashlight, gripping it so tightly her knuckles ached. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for any sign of movement. But everything looked normal. Dusty shelves. Stacks of old boxes. A broken wooden chair in the corner. And yet, something felt wrong. She took a slow step forward, sweeping the flashlight over the wall where she had seen the hand. And then she saw it. A gap in the wooden panels. Small. Almost unnoticeable. Margaret's stomach twisted. She stepped closer, raising a trembling hand to brush away the cobwebs. The wood was uneven, warped with age, but there was something behind it. A hidden space. Her fingers found the edge of a loose plank. She hesitated only for a second before pulling. The wood came away with a dull crack. Behind it, a tunnel. Margaret's breath caught. A narrow passage stretched into darkness, carved into the earth beneath the house. The air that drifted out was ice cold, carrying a scent so foul she gagged. Why was this here? Had Henry known about it? Her mind spun with questions, but one thing was certain, this tunnel wasn't meant to be found. And yet, something inside her whispered, "Go." Margaret swallowed hard. Every rational part of her screamed no, but she had come too far to turn back now. Taking a deep breath, she stepped inside. The tunnel was narrow, forcing her to crouch as she moved forward. The walls were made of rough, damp stone, and the floor was uneven beneath her bare feet. The deeper she went, the colder it became. Her breath fogged in the air. Somewhere in the distance, dripping water echoed through the passage. Margaret kept going. Then, a sound. Faint. A low, rhythmic scraping. Margaret's pulse quickened. She slowed her steps, straining to listen. The sound was coming from ahead. She lifted the flashlight, its weak beam barely cutting through the darkness. The passage opened into a larger space. Margaret hesitated at the threshold, her heart thudding against her ribs. Then, she stepped inside. The room was small, its walls lined with crumbling bricks. The floor was covered in dirt and old, tattered cloth. And in the center, Margaret's stomach lurched. A wooden chair. Heavy. Stained. Bolted to the ground. Thick leather straps hung limply from the arms and legs. A restraint chair. Margaret's breath came in shallow gasps. What the hell was this place? Her flashlight beam trembled as she scanned the rest of the room. Chains hung from the walls. Rusted. Worn. But they were used once. Something metallic glinted in the dirt near the chair. Margaret hesitated, then knelt down. Carefully, she brushed away the dirt. Her fingers touched something cold. A ring. Simple. Silver. But when she turned it over, her breath hitched. There was an engraving inside. H.W. Her blood ran cold. Henry Whitmore. Her husband's initials. Margaret's hands trembled. How had this ring ended up down here? Henry had been paralyzed for years. He couldn't have come down here. Unless. A terrible thought crawled into her mind. Had Henry been here before? Her pulse thundered in her ears. She had to get out. She turned. And froze. Footsteps. Coming from the tunnel behind her. Margaret's breath caught. The air around her suddenly felt thick, suffocating. Slowly, she lifted the flashlight toward the tunnel entrance. The beam flickered. A shadow moved. Margaret's blood turned to ice. Someone was standing there. Tall. Motionless. Watching. The figure took a slow step forward. Margaret staggered back, her body trembling. The flashlight flickered again. And for a split second, she saw its face. Her stomach dropped. It was Henry. But not the Henry she knew. His skin was pale, almost gray. His eyes, sunken, hollow, dark. And his mouth. A smile. Wide. Unnatural. Margaret screamed. The flashlight died. Everything plunged into darkness. Margaret didn't know how long she ran. She scrambled through the tunnel, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The walls scraped her arms, but she didn't stop. The air grew warmer, she was nearing the basement. Then, a voice. Margaret. Her stomach twisted. It was Henry's voice. But it wasn't coming from behind her. It was ahead. Margaret skidded to a stop. Silence. Then. A single whisper. You shouldn't have come down here. A hand grabbed her wrist. Margaret screamed. She wrenched free, bolting the last few steps toward the basement. She lunged for the opening, pulling herself up into the house. The moment she was inside, she slammed the wooden panel shut. Silence. Her chest heaved. Sweat dripped down her back. She waited. Listening. Nothing. The tunnel was silent. Margaret slowly backed away. Her pulse still hammered, but the house, it was quiet. As if nothing had happened. Then, from the bedroom. A sound. Margaret spun around. Henry's voice. Weak. Calling for her. Her stomach twisted. Was it really him? Or was it something else? Margaret clenched her fists. One thing was certain, she needed answers. And this time, she wasn't running. She was going to find out the truth. Margaret's hands trembled as she stood at the edge of the basement. Her breath was shallow, her body cold with sweat. The tunnel entrance was sealed, but she still felt like something was behind it. Watching. Waiting. Then, from the bedroom. Margaret? Henry's voice. Weak, almost fragile. Her heart pounded. Was it really him? Or was it something else? She had spent years taking care of her husband, feeding him, cleaning him, trusting him. But tonight, she had found his ring beneath the house, in a room that should not exist. A room with restraints. Chains. A chair bolted to the floor. A room that held secrets he never told her. Margaret wiped her damp palms on her nightgown. She had two choices. Ignore it. Pretend she had seen nothing and go back to the life she knew. Face him. Demand the truth. Margaret had spent too many years in silence. Too many nights with unspoken fears. Not tonight. She climbed the stairs, one slow step at a time. The old wooden floor creaked under her weight as she made her way toward the bedroom. The door was half open. Henry lay in bed, just as he had for years. His body unmoving, his hands resting on his lap. His eyes followed her as she entered. "Margaret," he said again, his voice barely above a whisper. She swallowed hard. "I found something." Henry didn't blink. "What did you find?" Margaret clenched her fists. "A tunnel. Under the house." A flicker of something passed through his expression. Fear? Recognition? He remained silent. Margaret stepped closer. It led to a room. A room with a chair and chains. "And I found your ring there, Henry." "How?" A long, heavy silence. Henry stared at her. His lips trembled, as if he wanted to say something, but he didn't. Margaret's patience snapped. She grabbed his hand. His fingers were cold, bony. "Tell me the truth." Henry's eyes filled with tears. His lips parted. But before he could speak, a sound echoed through the house. A creak. From the hallway. Margaret's stomach dropped. Someone else was here. Margaret spun around, her heart hammering. Silence. Then. Another creak. Closer this time. Margaret's pulse pounded in her ears. Slowly, she stepped toward the hallway, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The air in the house felt wrong. She reached the door and peered out. The hallway was empty. But something felt off. The old wooden floor had dust, but now there were footprints. Fresh. Leading toward the living room. Margaret's blood ran cold. Someone had been standing right outside the bedroom. Listening. Her hands shook. This wasn't just paranoia, someone else knew about the tunnel. And they were inside her house. Margaret's fingers curled around the nearest thing she could grab, a heavy glass lamp from the nightstand. She held it tight, forcing herself to breathe slowly. She moved through the dark hallway, following the footprints. Every nerve in her body screamed at her to run, but she didn't. She reached the living room. It was empty. Margaret hesitated, scanning the shadows. The room was still, untouched, except for one thing. The front door. It was unlocked. She was sure she had locked it before going to bed. Her grip on the lamp tightened. She took another step forward. And suddenly, something moved behind her. Margaret barely had time to turn before cold fingers wrapped around her wrist. She gasped, her pulse spiking. She swung the lamp instinctively. It shattered against the wall. The grip on her wrist vanished. Margaret staggered back, heart pounding. Her eyes darted around the room. Nothing. She was alone. Or at least, it seemed that way. Her chest heaved. Her mind screamed for her to leave the house, to run into the night and never look back. But she wasn't done yet. She turned back to Henry. She was getting her answers tonight. Henry's face was pale when she returned. His hands trembled in his lap. "Henry," Margaret whispered. Someone was in the house. His breath hitched. Margaret clenched her jaw. "I need you to tell me everything. Right now." Silence stretched between them. Then, finally, Henry spoke. "Margaret. I need you to listen carefully." She nodded, pulse hammering. "I never told you everything." Margaret swallowed. "About what?" Henry's lips trembled. "The paralysis. The room felt smaller. Margaret's throat tightened. "Henry, you." "I wasn't supposed to survive that night," he whispered. Margaret's blood turned to ice. "They were supposed to finish the job." Silence. Margaret stared at him, struggling to process what she had just heard. "Who, Henry?" she finally whispered. Henry's gaze darkened. His voice was barely audible. "The ones in the tunnel." Margaret felt like the floor had disappeared beneath her. Her body froze. The ones in the tunnel. Henry's entire body shuddered. Tears welled in his eyes. "They thought I was dead. That's why they left me. But I survived. And they..." His voice broke. "They never stopped watching." Margaret's breath caught in her throat. A sickening realization crept over her. The tunnel wasn't just an old, hidden space beneath the house. It was a place of death. A place where people had been taken. And Henry. Henry had been one of them. Margaret's mind raced. She remembered the chair in the hidden room, the restraints, the chains. The whispers in the darkness. She swallowed the lump in her throat. "Henry, why didn't you tell me?" His eyes glistened with tears. Because if they knew I was alive, they'd come back." A chill ran down Margaret's spine. And then Henry whispered 3 words that made her blood run cold. "They're already here." A loud thump sounded from the basement. Margaret's heart stopped. Her breath came in shallow, uneven gasps. Henry's eyes darted toward the doorway. "It's too late." The basement door creaked open. And something started coming up the stairs. A deep thud echoed from the basement. Margaret's breath hitched. Something was coming up the stairs. Her pulse pounded so hard she could hear it in her ears. The entire house suddenly felt too small, too dark, too wrong. Henry's fingers twitched against the sheets, his expression twisted in helpless terror. "Margaret, don't move." His voice was barely above a whisper. Margaret's body refused to listen. She turned her gaze to the hallway, her breath coming in shallow, quick gasps. The basement door had been closed before. Now it stood slightly open. The air in the room shifted. A faint creak. A shuffling sound. Something was inside the house. Margaret's grip tightened around the broken lamp base she had picked up earlier. Her fingers burned where the shards had cut into them, but she barely noticed. Henry's words from earlier rang in her head. "They thought I was dead. That's why they left me. But if they knew I survived, they'd come back." And now they had. Her body stiffened as the first shadow appeared in the hallway. She barely had time to process it before another thud sounded, and the door swung wide open. The dim light of the bedroom barely illuminated the figure standing at the threshold. Margaret's stomach twisted in pure horror. It was a man. Or at least, something that looked like a man. He was tall, too tall, his spine hunched unnaturally. His clothes were tattered, his skin stretched over his bones like it barely fit. But his eyes were empty holes. Black, hollow pits where his gaze should have been. Margaret couldn't breathe. The man stepped forward, his movements unnatural, almost as if his limbs didn't belong to him. His mouth twitched. "You should have never opened the tunnel." His voice was wrong, deep, raspy, as if it hadn't been used in years. Margaret's legs locked in place. She wanted to run, to scream, but something inside her refused to move. Henry's voice trembled. "Margaret, don't let him touch you." The man tilted his head. Slowly. Too slowly. Then, from behind him, another figure stepped out. Then another. Margaret's skin went cold. There were 3 of them now. All tall. All wrong. Their heads jerked at strange angles, their hollow eyes fixed on her. Then, they started moving. Margaret didn't think. She acted. She lunged for Henry's wheelchair. Her hands fumbled against the handles, her breath ragged. "Hold on," she gasped. Henry's face was pale, but he nodded. The moment her fingers wrapped around the wheels, she pushed. The chair lurched forward, rolling toward the doorway just as the figures stepped into the room. Margaret's heartbeat slammed against her ribs. She didn't have a plan. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew one thing. She had to get out. The creature's footsteps were too fast. Too close. Margaret reached the hallway, pushing Henry with everything she had. She heard them behind her. Their ragged breathing. Their bones creaking. Then, a hand brushed against her back. Margaret screamed. She threw her weight forward, gripping Henry's chair tight as she nearly tripped down the stairs. The figures didn't stop. They followed. One of them whispered. "You shouldn't be here, Margaret." Her name. Her name. How did they know her name? Margaret didn't care. She reached the front door. And froze. It was wide open. Someone had already been inside. Her breath caught. Then, from the darkness outside, a voice. "Margaret, stop." She whirled around. A figure stood at the doorway. Not one of them. Not like the creatures behind her. This was a man. Real. Human. Margaret's grip on Henry's wheelchair tightened. "Who the hell are you?" The man stepped into the dim light. His face was scarred. His clothes covered in dirt, his hands rough and calloused. But Margaret's stomach dropped. Because she recognized him. From an old photograph. From Henry's past. Her voice barely came out. "No, no, that's impossible." The man exhaled slowly. "Margaret, my name is John." Her heart stopped. John. Henry's brother. The one who had been missing for 30 years. Margaret felt dizzy. The air around her seemed to blur. Henry's brother. The one he had told her about in passing, years ago. The one who had disappeared when they were younger. She turned to Henry, but his face had drained of all color. His lips parted in shock. "J. John?" Henry's voice cracked. You're alive?" John didn't take his eyes off the figures behind Margaret. His jaw was tight, his body tense. "Henry," he said. "I never left." The air thickened. Margaret's brain screamed for an explanation. John's fists clenched. "You should have never reopened that tunnel." Margaret's breath shook. "What is it? What's in there?" John's voice was quiet. "The reason I never came home." Margaret's chest tightened. What do they want?" John looked at Henry. Henry, who had been paralyzed for years. The house was silent. Then John whispered. "They want to finish what they started." The creatures moved. Margaret screamed. John lunged forward. Something slammed into her. The world tilted. Margaret hit the ground hard, gasping as a sharp pain shot through her ribs. Henry's wheelchair tipped, he fell forward with a thud. The creatures surged toward them. And John did the only thing he could. He reached into his jacket. And pulled out a gun. Margaret's vision blurred. The last thing she heard. A single, deafening gunshot. Then. Darkness. A gunshot ripped through the silence. Margaret felt the world slow. She was on the ground, her head throbbing, her breath ragged. The weight of the fall had knocked the air from her lungs, and for a moment, she couldn't move. The creatures, the things that weren't quite human, had been lunging toward her and Henry. Their hollow eyes locked onto them. But now, Everything was still. A low, guttural sound filled the air. One of the creatures staggered back. Then it screamed. The sound was unnatural, like metal scraping against bone, a noise that made Margaret's skull feel like it was splitting apart. The creature clawed at its chest, where John's bullet had struck. But no blood. No wound. Just blackness seeping from the hole, swirling like smoke. John cursed under his breath. Margaret gasped, struggling to push herself up. She turned her head and saw Henry, collapsed on the floor. His frail body twisted unnaturally, his breathing shallow. "Henry," she choked out, crawling toward him. He was trembling. His lips moved, but no words came out. His eyes darted around wildly, full of terror. The creatures didn't stop. Even though one of them had been shot, the others were still advancing, their movements slow and deliberate, like they had all the time in the world. John grabbed Margaret's arm, yanking her back to her feet. "We need to move. Now." "But Henry." "I'll carry him," John snapped. Margaret barely had time to process before John bent down, lifting his brother with surprising ease. Henry let out a strangled noise. His body shook violently, his breath hitching. Margaret reached for him, but John was already running. "Come on." Margaret forced herself to move. Behind them, the creatures followed. Their steps were slow. Too slow. Like they were playing with them. Margaret felt her chest tighten. They weren't trying to catch them yet. They were hurting them. Toward something. John raced down the hall, carrying Henry as if he weighed nothing. Margaret barely kept up, her feet stumbling over the old wooden floor. She could hear the creaks behind her, the things were coming. Then, John did something Margaret didn't expect. He ran toward the basement. Margaret's stomach dropped. "No, wait," she started. But it was too late. John kicked the basement door open. The old wooden frame splintered, revealing the dark, gaping hole of the stairway below. John took the steps 2 at a time. Margaret hesitated only for a second before following. The air grew colder as she descended. A deep, unnatural chill seeped into her bones, making her breath come out in shaky gasps. The basement was darker than before. Almost like the shadows had grown. And the tunnel, the hidden entrance Margaret had found, was open again. John didn't slow. He ran straight for the tunnel, Henry still limp in his arms. Margaret turned her head. The creatures were at the top of the basement stairs. They didn't run. They didn't need to. Because Margaret finally understood. They were going exactly where the creatures wanted them to go. The tunnel walls were too close. Margaret's breath echoed around her as she ran through the underground passage. The smell of dirt, mold, and something rotten clung to the air. Ahead, John moved like he had been here before. Like he knew where he was going. Henry whimpered weakly in his arms. Margaret's pulse pounded. "John, where are we going?" John didn't answer. He just kept running. Margaret's heart clenched. "John, please." Finally, he spoke. His voice was low. Rough. Haunted. To where it all started. Margaret felt her stomach churn. A few moments later, they arrived. It was the same room Margaret had found before. The one hidden beneath the house. The one with the chair. With the chains. With the blood. John set Henry down carefully. Margaret's breath came in ragged gasps as she turned in a slow circle, her skin crawling. The walls. They were covered in scratches. Not just scratches, words. Carved into the stone. Margaret stepped closer, squinting at the faded writing. Then, her blood ran cold. Because there, etched into the wall, over and over. Henry. Her husband's name. Dozens of times. Some of the carvings were old. Some were fresh. Margaret's fingers trembled as she traced the deep gouges. John. Her voice was barely a whisper. What is this place? John exhaled. Then he said the words that changed everything. This is where they kept Henry. Margaret felt her body freeze. Her ears rang. Her breath stilled. What are you saying? She whispered. John turned to her. His eyes were dark, filled with something heavy. Henry wasn't in an accident, Margaret. Silence. John swallowed hard. They didn't paralyze him. Margaret's chest tightened. Then, what happened to him? John took a step closer. His voice was barely above a whisper. They were keeping him here. Margaret felt like she was going to be sick. No, that's not. John cut her off. They were feeding off of him, Margaret. Her blood turned to ice. They don't kill their victims, John continued, his voice rough. Not right away. They keep them alive. They drain them. Piece by piece. Until there's nothing left. Margaret shook her head violently. That doesn't make sense. He's been home with me for years. John's expression darkened. Margaret, how much do you really know about the man you've been taking care of? The world seemed to tilt. Margaret whipped around. Her gaze fell on Henry. For the first time, she really looked at him. His pale skin. His too thin frame. The way his fingers twitched. The way his breath rattled. Henry's eyes fluttered open. And Margaret froze. Because his pupils were completely black. A slow, twisted smile crept onto Henry's lips. And then he spoke. You should have left me down here, Margaret.